The morning began like any other at the ITV studios. Lorraine Kelly, Britain's beloved morning show host, prepared her cards, straightened her notes, and gave her warm smile to the camera. But behind that smile, there was a flicker of tension. Her guest that day was none other than Sir Cliff Richard, the legendary singer whose charm and grace had captured audiences for over 6 decades. What no one expected was that this calm, cheerful interview would spiral into one of the most talked about on-air clashes in Lorraine's career. As the cameras rolled, the opening was perfectly cordial. "Sir Cliff Richard, it's wonderful to have you back on the show," Lorraine greeted him with her trademark enthusiasm. "Thank you, Lorraine. Always a pleasure to see you," Cliff replied politely, his silver hair gleaming under the studio lights. They started by talking about his upcoming anniversary tour, celebrating 65 years in music. Cliff spoke about his early days, the challenges he faced, and how he still felt the same passion for performing. The audience, both in the studio and at home, were enchanted. But the mood began to shift when Lorraine, always one to ask direct questions, leaned forward with a curious tone. "Cliff, you've been very open about your faith, your privacy, and your experiences with the media. But some people say you've become a bit defensive lately. Do you think fame has changed you?" The question hit a nerve. Cliff's friendly smile faltered for a moment. "I don't think that's fair, Lorraine," he said, his voice tightening slightly. "I've spent years defending myself from false accusations and media scrutiny. That doesn't make me defensive, it makes me human." Lorraine nodded, sensing tension but pushing on, as any seasoned host would. "Of course, I understand that. But recently, some of your fans have noticed you've refused interviews and appearances. Is that true?" Cliff crossed his arms. "I choose my appearances carefully, Lorraine. After what I went through with the BBC raid, I learned that not every camera deserves my trust." The audience grew quiet. Lorraine, perhaps realizing she had stepped onto sensitive ground, tried to lighten the mood. "Yes, I remember that time was very difficult for you. But don't you think being open helps heal old wounds?" Cliff's eyes hardened. "Healing doesn't come from rehashing painful moments on live television. I came here to talk about music, not to defend my past again." There was an uncomfortable silence. Lorraine shifted in her seat, visibly unsettled. "I didn't mean to upset you, Cliff. It's just part of your journey, and our viewers." "My journey," Cliff interrupted sharply, "is not for public dissection anymore. I've given enough of myself to the public. Sometimes I wonder if interviews like this are even worth it." Gasps were heard from the crew. Lorraine blinked, trying to keep her composure. "Sir Cliff, this is a friendly morning show. I think our viewers would be quite surprised by your tone today." "And I'm surprised by yours," he retorted. "I thought I was invited here to celebrate my work, not to be cornered." Lorraine looked to the producer off camera, uncertain whether to continue or cut to a break. But before she could make the call, Cliff stood up. "I'm sorry, Lorraine, but I don't think I'll stay for the rest of this segment." The audience gasped again. Lorraine tried to defuse the situation. "Cliff, please, let's not end like this. We've been friends for years." Cliff sighed, visibly upset but composed. "Friends don't ambush friends on live television." He turned and walked off the set as the cameras continued rolling, leaving Lorraine sitting there, speechless. The director cut to commercial in panic. For the next several minutes, chaos filled the studio. Producers rushed after Cliff, while Lorraine sat quietly, gathering herself. When the show returned from break, Lorraine offered a calm explanation. "Well, that was a bit unexpected. Sir Cliff Richard has left the studio early, and we wish him all the best on his tour." Her tone was professional, but her eyes betrayed a mix of hurt and disbelief. By noon, clips of the exchange had already gone viral. Social media exploded. Some defended Cliff, saying Lorraine had been too invasive. Others accused him of being overly sensitive. "Cliff Richard storms off Lorraine Kelly's show, unbelievable." One headline read. Another said, "Lorraine pushes too far, Cliff fights back." By the evening, both their representatives had issued short statements. Lorraine's team said, "Lorraine has great respect for Sir Cliff Richard and wishes him success on his upcoming tour." Cliff's spokesperson replied, "Sir Cliff prefers interviews that focus on his music, not his personal pain." Privately, Lorraine sat in her dressing room, replaying the conversation in her head. She hadn't meant to hurt him. She'd only wanted to give viewers a real, honest glimpse of a man they'd admired for so long. But sometimes, honesty comes with a price, especially when it brushes against old scars. Outside, the London rain began to fall, tapping softly on the studio windows. Somewhere across the city, Cliff Richard sat in the back of his car, looking out at the same gray sky, wondering if the price of fame would ever stop following him. Everywhere, news outlets, gossip blogs, and entertainment sites had turned the heated exchange between Cliff Richard and Lorraine Kelly into a full-blown media storm. Clips from the interview flooded social media, some slowed down, others edited for drama, each carrying its own narrative. On one side, fans defended Cliff passionately. "He's been through enough. Lorraine should have known better," one post read. But others sided with the host. Lorraine was just doing her job. Cliff completely overreacted. By noon, the tension had transformed into one of the most trending stories in the UK. Lorraine arrived at the ITV studio feeling the weight of the previous day. She walked past the bright posters and makeup artists whispering softly, pretending not to notice her heavy expression. Her producer, Sarah, met her outside the green room. "Lorraine, the network's talking about yesterday. They want you to address it briefly on today's show," Sarah said gently. Lorraine sighed. "I figured they would. I just don't want to make it worse. Cliff's a legend, I've admired him since I was a teenager." "I know," Sarah replied. "But people want to hear from you. Be honest, but kind." When the show went live, Lorraine looked straight into the camera, her voice calm but sincere. "Yesterday's interview with Sir Cliff Richard didn't go as planned," she began. "He's someone I deeply respect and have always admired. Our conversation touched on sensitive topics, and I truly regret if anything I asked caused him discomfort. My only intention was to celebrate his incredible career." Her words were measured, genuine, the kind of apology that came from both professionalism and heart. Meanwhile, across town, Cliff Richard sat in his living room, sipping tea while his publicist scrolled through comments online. "Cliff, your fans are completely on your side," she said. "Everyone's talking about how strong you were." Cliff frowned slightly. "Strong, maybe. But I didn't handle it well. Lorraine's always been kind to me. I shouldn't have walked out like that." He picked up his phone, staring at the blank message screen. After a few moments, he typed a simple text. "Greater than, Lorraine, I'm sorry things went wrong yesterday. I was caught off guard. You've always been fair to me. Let's talk." Lorraine read the message just before her next segment. Relief washed over her face. She immediately replied, "Greater than, thank you, Cliff. I completely understand. Would you be open to joining me again, privately, no cameras, so we can clear the air?" 2 days later, they met quietly in a private corner of a cafe in Kensington. No cameras, no producers, no audience, just two professionals trying to make peace. Lorraine arrived first, nervous but determined. She looked up as Cliff entered, wearing a simple gray jacket and a faint smile. "Lorraine," he greeted softly. "Cliff, it's good to see you," she said, standing to shake his hand. For a moment, the tension melted away. They sat down, and after ordering tea, the conversation began. "I wanted to apologize in person," Cliff started. "I shouldn't have left like that. You caught me off guard, and I reacted emotionally. The truth is, those questions brought back some painful memories I thought I'd left behind." Lorraine nodded. "I understand, Cliff. I never meant to bring that pain back. You've been through things most people can't imagine. I should have been more careful." He smiled gently. "We both did what we thought was right in the moment. Maybe it was just one of those mornings." They both laughed lightly, the ice finally broken. For the next hour, they spoke not as host and guest, but as two people who had grown up in the same business, both shaped and bruised by fame. Cliff shared stories from his early tours, his fear of losing trust in the media, and how isolation sometimes followed him despite his success. Lorraine listened, her respect for him deepening even more. Before they left, Lorraine said, "You know, if you're ever ready, I'd love to have you back on the show, on your terms. No surprises. Just music and memories." Cliff chuckled. "I'd like that. Let's make it about the songs, not the scars." A week later, ITV announced that Cliff Richard would appear again on Lorraine for a special performance celebrating his 65 years in music. The internet buzzed with curiosity. Would there be tension, or forgiveness? When the day arrived, the set was filled with soft lighting and a small live audience. Lorraine introduced him warmly. "Today, we're honored to welcome back one of Britain's most beloved artists. Please welcome Sir Cliff Richard." Cliff entered with his familiar grace, holding a microphone and smiling. The audience erupted in applause. He performed one of his classics, The Young Ones, and when he finished, Lorraine joined him on stage. They exchanged a brief hug, the kind that said everything words couldn't. Lorraine turned to the camera, smiling genuinely. "Sometimes, even after a storm, there's a bit of sunshine waiting on the other side." Cliff added with a wink, "And sometimes, the best duets happen after a disagreement." The crowd laughed and clapped as the show ended on a high note. That evening, both their names trended again, but this time, the headlines read differently.